Hello. Today I'm joined by Eric. Eric runs a blog called Physical Ethics, which deals with philosophical and scientific topics. So the link to Eric's blog is going to be in the description. So Eric, thanks for coming on my channel.
All right. Hey, Liam. Liam, nice to be here.
Cool. Yeah, so we're going to be walking through, we decided we're going to be talking about one of Eric's posts, his most recent one. The link to that will also be in the description, but Eric's going to walk us through his most recent blog post.
Thanks, Liam. Nice to be here.
Cool. Yep, nice to have you.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let me just put this down here. Read this. See here. What I got going. All right, you still see me just fine here?
Yep.
All right. So since most people probably haven't read the post, let me just go ahead and read it out to you, and then we'll go ahead and talk about it.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. What's known as philosophy might be said to have formerly existed for 2.5 millennia in the Western world. Furthermore, what's known as science might be said to have emerged from philosophy somewhere around 4 centuries ago, while the substance of philosophy might be referred to as academic rather than practical. Harder forms of science have provided understandings which have utterly transformed our species. But what about softer varieties of science, or the field which aim to help us better understand ourselves? These fields have remained relatively primitive, and I suspect largely because they're naturally more vulnerable to the sorts of things which philosophers have been unable to nail down. Consider, for example, the hard science of physics. Diverging metaphysical positions do not seem to exist here, since without accepting the metaphysics of natural causality, such exploration makes very little sense anyway. Furthermore, note that the topic of value, or axiology, lies well beyond its scope, and so standard uncertainty here shouldn't impact the field at all. Though significant impediments to physics, given the only significant impediment to physics, given the troubles that philosophers have had, seem to concern epistemology. This is to say that modern physics may be somewhat harmed, given that philosophers have not yet formally agreed upon any structural guidelines from which to do science. A far more serious situation may exist for the basic behavioral science of psychology. How might we effectively grasp the nature of something which values and yet have no basic conceptual agreement regarding what's valuable? We can add to this clear epistemological failures in the field, given ongoing reproducibility crisis, as well as metaphysical influences which aren't always natural. So in these regards, the softness of this science should not be surprising. I propose one principle of metaphysics as well as 2 principles of epistemology from which to potentially improve science in a general sense, and certainly fields such as psychology. For this post, however, the focus is on my single principle of axiology. Observe that before life existed on our planet, nothing should have been valuable to anything. And would the emergence of life itself create valuable existence? For example, do trees value their existence? Though some may believe this, it's clearly a fringe idea. What about brains? Does such a machine cause existence to be valuable to the thing that has it? Instead, I'd suggest that value exists by means of something which certain types of brains do. To be explicit, I believe that value exists given their production of qualia, sentience, utility, valence, affect, pleasure, pain, whatever term one wants to use to call stuff that personally matters. This seems to be what provides life with purpose, which is also known as teleology. Observe that if this does happen to be the case, then the value of existing may functionally be defined as nothing more than this specific stuff itself. How good will my life be to me before I die? Add up my positive valence, subtract my negative valence over this period, and that should be a pretty good, effective conceptual answer. Now, how good will my existence be to someone else, or perhaps to a given society? That would depend upon how good to bad I cause that subject to feel. How good is the existence of a given city over a certain period of time? To that entity as a whole, that would once again add the positive and subtract the negatives, and this time for each sentient constituent over that period, and this should be an effective answer. Conceptually, this is an extremely simple idea. Now, the field of psychology has not yet reached this conclusion, and I consider this to largely explain why it hasn't yet developed any experimentally successful broad theory regarding our nature. Conversely, the side science of economics has developed a reasonably successful general theory regarding our nature, and it's founded upon the premise that I'm now advocating for the basic science of psychology. Economists use the term utility to refer to the value of existing. Now, the reason that the central science of psychology has not yet been able to take such a step, I think, is because of the social tool of morality. This is to say that social pressure exists for us to be perceived as doing positive rather than negative things for others. Thus, if psychologists were to assert that the most valuable existence for a given subject is is to maximize happiness, and so not the altruistic promotion of happiness for others, then these scientists should be penalized socially as advocates for selfishness. They should tend to be attacked as full hedonists to potentially help take some of the pressure off psychologists who would be inclined to take this step for their science. I believe that a respected group of philosophers will need to accept some version of my single principle of axiology. It states, it's possible for a machine which is not conscious, like a brain, to produce a punishment-reward dynamic which constitutes all that's valuable to anything, anywhere. Just as electricity powers the computers that we build, neurons power the brains in our heads. This is the stuff which powers the conscious form of function by which existence is perceived. Note that while it's standard for people today to consider what's moral to exist as a welfare proxy, my own proposal lies in contrast. I consider what's moral to exist merely as what a given society is thought to approve of, and so a mechanism of social influence. Conversely, welfare itself should exist as how good to bad something is caused to feel. Two very different ideas. Furthermore, mixing them up should make it far more difficult for humanity to intelligently lead its various lives, as well as structure its various societies. All right, that was a lot.
Thanks, Eric. So, yes, I figured we could just go through your posts from start to finish. So, in the beginning, you talk about philosophy and science. So, you mentioned how philosophy might be referred to as academic rather than practical. So, but I was curious, what would be your definitions of philosophy and science? How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, I don't consider them fundamentally different. I kind of, they call me a scientism, in the sense that they're both part of the same thing. I don't consider them separate, really.
So you're saying you call yourself a science? What is that called? You subscribe to scientism.
Scientism.
I was about to say you call yourself a scientist, but that would not. I guess you can't really use that term.
Scientism is a word that's referred to. You're not supposed to call everything science, like art, for example, but there are certain things about reality that I think philosophers have under their domain. But anyway, to get to your question, to me, philosophy sort of is the boundaries of science. Okay, you've got metaphysics. That is, what exists. Or sort of like how you consider existence, whether it's magical or causal. epistemology would be the way you do science, technically, and then the axiology would be the value side, which scientists don't much get into, and then they need if they want to study something that's for which existence is valuable. So I consider it the structure of science would be philosophy.
Okay.
So
Interesting. So yeah. So you mentioned, you said science started about 3 or 4 centuries ago, right? So that's interesting that because that was, I guess, around with the development of the scientific method. Before that,
yeah,
it was all philosophy, and then it became more scientific. Okay.
yeah. It's something where you didn't have people that were agreeing upon anything back before science, and then they called it natural philosophy. It was actually science, and then they started figuring things out and working things out so that things worked, and so gained agreement. Philosophy's never gained agreement, and that's a problem. So
Yes, there's definitely. I've thought about that before. Like, what are the fields where there's the most disagreement? And I think philosophy would top the list there. I mean, even like the most basic questions of philosophy, you have like philosophers disagreeing about. So, yeah. Whereas with science, there's a lot more
well,
agreement.
that's the
There's still
point,
some disagreement.
and
So.
a lot of times they consider it more of an art. And I'm
Philosophy,
not
yeah.
yeah, philosophy is more of an art, and I'm not saying you can't have it as an art, but I'm saying we need a different community. If you want to be artist, go ahead, be artist. But we also need a different community that is not an art.
Right.
The community with generally accepted principles.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Right.
until we have that, I don't think that soft science can harden.
Yeah, I don't consider philosophy an art. I would definitely consider it something else. I don't know what I would call it though, because
don't dismiss it as an art, because if someone wants to be an artist, go ahead and do it.
yeah,
that way.
I think maybe you could say certain types of philosophy or art forms. Like if you look at something like existentialism, like what's the meaning of life? I think that becomes more of an art than other fields like metaphysics, where I think it's more. I was going to call it a science, but I don't know if I really want to call philosophy a science either, because I wouldn't
The
call
structure of
myself.
science. The structure.
I don't. Yeah, I have to think about that. How much I agree. Like, I still want to preserve the distinction between philosophy and science. For me, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't consider philosophy to be a subset of science. But
well,
yeah.
I'm considering the structure under which science functions.
Right. It's kind of like a meta level, I guess.
You need certain things in order to do science.
Mm-hmm.
Metaphysics, you can't. I mean, scientists do science without thinking about anything about metaphysics, but it's there behind the scenes.
Exactly.
What is the metaphysics of science? Naturalism, causality. Right. And so if you don't have that, you don't really have a premise from which to do science. My first principle of epistemology, which I'm not getting into, or my first principle of metaphysics, which I'm not getting into right now, but regardless, it's a structure. Anyway.
Yeah, so I want to go on to let me see. I guess. Yeah, I want to ask about the part. I think a little before you presented your principle of axiology, you talked about the pressure that's on psychologists. Yeah, could you just elaborate on that? I'm trying to find it in the post.
Right. The pressure would be to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, to be good, to be nice. That's a social pressure called morality, essentially.
Right, because for you, morality is a social tool, right? Yeah, so that would be right. So we would, I guess, right. You're a moral anti-realist. I think, yeah, and obviously I lean towards moral anti-realism. So we could talk about later how it worked, our approach to morality as moral anti-realists. But and then you talked about like I'm trying to find the article, but like about it's like I think you were talking about like punishing psychologists being punished or something.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it here.
Yeah. No, that's your original point there in your question. The point being, if we say that the sentient entity the value of existence for a sentient entity is its happiness. So you add up all the units of happiness it has over some period of time, and that's how good existence is for that thing. And it could be horrible because, of course, it could be in pain. But now, morality would be a different idea in the sense that it's not about how good something feels, but it's how good you treat other things to make other things feel better. Okay, or other people or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a social tool because it for us to come together into societies, evolution kind of worked it out apparently that we need to have pressure on people to not be selfish,
Mm-hmm.
right? If they're selfish, then they're not going to, they can lie, especially, once we have people that can speak, they're going to start lying to each other and all sorts of things that kind of can hurt society. So there's got to be a way to counteract that, which is morality.
Mm-hmm.
So the point being that if the scientist can't understand that the scientist is under that influence as well, they can't theorize our nature, which is ultimately self-interested. So that's the point that's why, well, you notice that I put in there that economists have decided that utility, which is essentially happiness, is all that matters to anything, right?
You're saying economists, in terms of money, they're saying that money is what matters to
Yeah,
people.
that they have a proxy which would be money, but
Okay.
ultimately, in the literature, ultimately that's supposed to reduce back to value,
Okay.
or happiness, or that, and that's the point. But they can sort of sidestep it a little bit and say, oh no, we're just talking about money, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of separation. Now the psychologist can't do that. The psychologist kind of has to say, all right, well, happiness is all that matters, and they don't, specifically given the social tool of morality, I believe. And so my point being that we need to get real about it, and that's what it is. It's not a morality has harmed the field, I think. That's what I'm saying.
The field of philosophy or
No,
science or both?
I'm talking about psychology.
Oh, psychology, which you would consider a science, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, a subset of science. Yeah.
It's a soft science.
Okay. And how do you distinguish between soft sciences and hard sciences?
Well, uh, hard sciences have generally accepted understandings that work practically in society. You use physics for engineering and such,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Okay.
works. But psychology is soft.
So would the hard sciences be physics, chemistry, biology? Would there be any others? Or are those the only three?
Oh no, no. In general, like I say, I even consider economics
A hard
pretty
science.
hard,
Okay.
reasonably hard. But I mean, geology, whatever. Uh, the more human it gets, and the more central, the more close to psychology, the softer you'll find it.
Mm.
Neuroscience is a hard science. Technically, it's medical and so on. But when you start talking about consciousness, it's kind of no.
Let's make it
And
philosophical.
yeah, well, it depends upon the more basic sciences which supervene upon them, such as psychology, which is soft when you get into, and so they're proposing things which are a little bit kind of strange, you know. They're, if you don't have the basics, then you can't talk about how they work neurologically, and so that's a bit of a problem in neuroscience if it wants to go into consciousness. I think we need to get some of the basic sciences down first. But so it goes.
Yeah, I think for me, I think neuroscience is important when we're studying consciousness, but at the same time, well, I'm a dualist, whereas I think you're a physicalist, right? So for me, I don't think neuroscience could ever fully explain consciousness in the way that physicalists think it can. So I guess, like, if you think of like the philosophical zombie thought experiment, like would you say philosophical zombies are logically possible? Are they metaphysically possible? Or how do you handle that thought experiment?
Yeah, let's see here. Specifically, logically possible, yes, given dualism.
Logically possible as in we can imagine them without contradicting ourselves. Like in the same way that a unicorn is logically possible even if no unicorns exist. You're saying philosophical zombies are logically possible even if none exist.
Yeah, specifically magically possible.
And with different laws of nature, maybe. The point is, if you had different laws.
No. Well, not different laws of nature. Causality. What we have. The reason that we can be conscious is because of, I believe, is because of causality. There are causal dynamics in my head which do things which cause me to feel good and bad. Good and bad being, sentience. And I believe that there is nothing beyond causality which causes that. So that would be of this world. Okay.
So you would say neuroscience could fully explain consciousness?
I'm not saying anything about us idiots.
But in terms of like, if we knew everything, if you imagine an omniscient being, would it say yes? Neuroscience explains consciousness.
It exists, not for us probably, but we can't understand everything. We're idiots. To me.
Right, but the point is, if someone was omniscient, they would see how neuroscience explains consciousness.
Yeah, okay. There's causal dynamics involved. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would call a monist view.
Right, physicalist. Mm-hmm. So you philosophical zombies say are logically possible. Are they metaphysically possible for you?
Metaphysically possible, given dualism.
What do you mean by given dualism? Like,
if causality fails, okay, if there is something not of this world which creates it, as in Cartesian dualism, that's what I would say. Yes, metaphysically, it's possible, given Cartesian dualism. You'd have that consciousness.
So would the laws of nature have to be different in order for P-zombies to be?
Well, I don't. If you talk about the laws of nature, I kind of would think about causal dynamics.
Right. So I'm saying, given the causal dynamics of our universe, would it be possible for there to be a P-zombie? And it seems like you're saying no.
Yeah. Okay. No, because it would depend upon what we need in order to be us is to feel for something to be like what it is. And if something doesn't have some different than that, it's not going to be like the same. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to figure out what type of physicalist you are. So, if there would, I guess the next question is Cartesian dualism metaphysically possible?
Yeah, I just don't believe it.
Okay, so it's metaphysically possible. So I think you would be a type C physicalist then, like David Chalmers has distinguished.
Yeah.
Okay, type C. Yeah, I think that one makes the most sense. I can't make sense of type A. Those are the ones who deny the logical possibility. I can't understand that because the very fact that we can talk about P zombies to me proves that they are logically possible. And then also people who deny their metaphysical possibility. I don't know how you can say that they're metaphysically impossible, even if that you could imagine different laws of nature. But the point is, if it's metaphysically possible for the laws of nature to be different, and if different laws of nature would allow P zombies, then P zombies are metaphysically possible. But you're saying they're both logically and metaphysically possible, but because the causal dynamics yield consciousness, that's why you call yourself a physicalist. Is that correct?
That's my belief. That's my belief. And that gets into my, first, my single principle of metaphysics, which I couldn't say anyway. If without causal dynamics, there's nothing to understand.
Everything would be random, I guess. I'm trying to imagine a world without causal dynamics. I guess you would just have a bunch of stuff randomly happening.
Everything, but if anything lacks causality, that would be supernatural, and it's possible to understand. Now, it could be that's the case, but if that's the case, then why try to figure it out?
So what about something like quantum mechanics? Like if you say, if you look at, I don't know, like Schrodinger's cat, or if you if you have something where you can't actually explain, like if you're saying like the odds of a particle decaying within the next minute, if you say it's 50% and it does decay, you can't really explain why it decayed in the same way that you can explain why the apple fell off the tree, right? How do you handle quantum mechanics with this view?
It's all about ignorance.
So would you say there's nothing causes? Let's say you take a particle that has a 50% chance of decaying within the next minute, and it does decay. Would you say nothing caused it to decay, or what if something did cause it to decay? What caused the particle to decay?
Either it's natural or it's supernatural.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's just law of non-contradiction, or the law of the excluded middle, right?
So yeah, it's one or the other. and I'm on the natural side, which means it's deterministic.
So do you have a view of quantum mechanics that makes it deterministic?
No.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
Smart.
But like, if you had to guess, would you say quantum mechanics is deterministic or indeterministic?
I'm saying deterministic.
Okay.
That's just my metaphysics, though. Now,
right.
What I would do is see. We're talking about. There's a difference between epistemology and ontology.
Right. The difference between epistemic probability and ontological probability. So you're saying it's epistemically. It could be epistemically 50%, but if you had all the information, it's still not 50% at an ontological level.
Ontologically, it's going to be certain.
Okay.
If causality doesn't fail. So,
and what happens if causality fails? Is that like?
Then it's magic.
So you use magic in the sense of the supernatural, something that's not natural, but then it's difficult.
Non-causal.
Okay.
Non-causal, magic, supernatural, whatever.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine. Like, I think that quantum mechanics is indeterministic, but I know there are interpretations that are deterministic. But I think for me,
you start to get a many worlds bullshit, and
I mean, I can see like many worlds is like it's unintuitive, but at the same time, it does resolve a lot of the problems. But
no,
because like, how do you explain? Like, I can see how I see the appeal of the deterministic view, because then you don't have that problem of like if a particle decays, you can't really explain why it decayed. You can just say, well, it had to decay. But if you take the indeterministic view and it does decay, then it's like, why did it decay? And the simplest answer is it did decay. It decayed in one universe and not in one world and not in the other. So it branched off in two different worlds. So it's very unintuitive, but at the same time, I can see the appeal of it. I can also see the appeal of the deterministic view. The only thing is like, it seems to me there has to be some randomness. Like, can you explain why?
Mm,
Do you think the laws of nature are necessary? Like, would you consider laws of nature to be in the same category as mathematical truths, or do you put them in a different category where they're not necessary? They're just do the laws of nature have to be the way that they are? That's the question.
I definitely don't put them in terms of math.
Okay, so then they
Math
wouldn't.
is a language that we build, just like English and all the other languages that we
Interesting.
build.
I would put it in a different category than English, than spoken languages in terms of like English and
Well,
Spanish.
they are different. It's an
Same.
invented language. It's an invented language, and English is an evolved language.
Okay.
But that's just still languages, and they're completely they're constructs of consciousness. Now, if you're going to talk about what really exists, that's a whole different whole different ballgame.
So yeah, the reason I brought up math was I consider mathematical truths to be necessary. So 2 + 2 = 4. That's a necessary truth, and that is true in every possible world. So I guess my question is, are the laws of nature the same in every possible world, or are there
No.
possible worlds? Okay, so they're not necessary. So then if they're not
No.
necessary, so then where I'm going with this is, if they're not necessary, then why are they this way in our universe? Why are the laws of nature the way that they are in this universe? Tough question, I guess. But
Well, it is what it is.
do you kind of take like a brute fact view, I guess? The laws of nature are brute facts, or no?
I can give you this. There's one element of reality, ontological reality, which I can tell you that exists. Only one.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I think, that I exist.
That you exist.
I think
As in-
therefore I am.
Right.
You don't have to exist. The world doesn't have
Oh yeah,
to
the whole like
exist.
solipsism.
Only thing has to exist is that there's something that's thinking.
Right.
Rene Descartes.
Yeah.
Only truth. And then you can build on that. That is that's the beginning. So everything else is a question mark.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, so I understand that we can't be certain about these things, but I think the direction I was going with the laws of nature is, like, if the laws of nature didn't have to be the way they are, and yet they are the way they are, I'm saying, why are they the way that they are?
Yeah.
And if you say it's a brute fact, it seems to me that's random. You're saying the laws of nature just happen to be the way that they are, and that sounds random to me.
No, I'm not saying they happen to be the way they are by means of causal dynamics.
So what caused the laws of nature to be the way that they are?
Causality caused nature.
Why?
The way they are. That would I know.
Right, but yeah, the point I'm getting at is that it seems
metaphysics. That's my metaphysics is causality. Now, I could be a supernaturalist and say, because of God, I could say that.
But yeah, I know you're not going to say that.
But I don't.
Right, so I'm asking why, and the point I'm making is that it seems to me, if you're saying the laws of nature are contingent, then it seems to me that you have randomness then, because if you're saying, and then if I ask why are they the way that they are, and you're saying you don't know what caused them to be the way they are, it sounds like they're random then. If you can't give an explanation, if there's not an explanation a priori,
why would reality depend upon what I think?
That's not really the point. So what I'm saying is that, I guess the question is, are the laws of nature, do they have to be true a priori, or are they just a posteriori truths? And it sounds like you're saying they're a posteriori truths.
Right. Yeah.
You see I think you see the point I'm making.
I think, therefore I am, and the conscious being tries to figure things out, okay? And it could, and all I have is causality is understandable.
To an extent, is it though? Is causality understandable?
But there is a reason that if you have reason, then there's a possibility for understanding.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if there is no reason, if there is no causal dynamics, there's no reason to understand it. There's nothing to understand. Okay. So,
Right.
I presume that there are causal dynamics, not because it's true, because it's convenient. Okay. And that's the end of it. And I know that I exist. And then from this position, it is where that it's from this position that we can try to figure things out. That's why science tries to figure things out. Philosophy tries to help science figures things out. But that's the end of it.
So, like when you said I forget what you said, you believe that they're true out of convenience, not, I forget what you said. Do you remember what you said exactly?
No, what are you talking about?
I think you're talking about the laws of nature. You said you believe, or no, causality. I think you said you believe causality because it's convenient. I don't know. You used the word convenience. I'm trying to remember what you said exactly.
That's my single principle of metaphysics.
And what is
it's things happen either causally or non-causally, right?
Right, law of the excluded middle.
Yeah. And if they happen causally, then you can understand them, and if they're not, otherwise it's not possible. So I go ahead and go with the causality for that reason.
So it's a pragmatic approach.
Yeah. So that's why it's pragmatic, is because otherwise no. And it could be that I'm wrong, but this is my metaphysics, and someone else can have their metaphysics. But science depends upon my metaphysics. So
depends on causality, right? If we didn't have causality, it doesn't do much science. But yeah. So I think it still seems to me that there has to be some randomness and thus some lack of causality. If we're saying the laws of nature are only a posteriori truths and not a priori truths, there has to be some randomness. If they're not a priori, then they're contingent. I guess it's important to distinguish. There's the necessary contingent distinction. There's the a priori or posteriori, and then there's this analytic synthetic distinction. There's those three distinctions, and I shouldn't equivocate between them. But the point I'm making is that if laws of nature are a posteriori truths, then there is some randomness and lack of causality.
Well, only that doesn't have to be the case. That you can suspect that.
I guess,
and indeed, a lot of physicists take an ontological interpretation of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, but then you invalidate science. So go ahead and do that if you like. But some physicists say to themselves, okay, I don't know, like Einstein, I don't know why this happens this way, and we can't measure it perfectly, but I'm still a naturalist. I still believe that there is causality in the end, even if I don't know why. So take your pick.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so if the laws of nature are a posteriori, would you say they're also contingent rather than necessary? I think the laws of nature, are they necessary or contingent?
Well, when you say laws, you're talking about epistemology, and okay, laws are always going to be a little bit funky, but if you're talking about reality itself, I have to say laws, nothing written down. I believe that it's certain. I believe in determinism. I believe that everything that ever will happen is going to happen given the circumstances. I could be wrong, but that's the way I consider my metaphysics.
Yeah, I think another question I wanted to ask you was what your view is on the laws of nature. So I don't know if you're familiar with it. There's like the necessitarian view, the regularist view. Are you familiar with those?
Not
that
the
distinction?
terms, no.
Okay, so Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm even familiar enough to really explain them well, but
Yeah.
yeah. Basically, the question is, are the laws of nature? I don't know if real is the right word, but there's the one view that the laws of nature actually cause things to happen. The other view is that the laws of nature are just descriptions of what happens. But that's
Yeah,
yeah. I don't
yeah.
know if I don't want to just to run too
No.
long, so maybe we shouldn't get into that. And we're getting pretty off topic. But
Well, what's the time on it right now?
we're at 40 minutes. I would like to keep it at around an hour most.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So it's I mean, we still can
But
move into your principle of
but no, the
axiology if you
point
want.
was just easily laws are epistemic. They are not real.
Okay, so I think you would be a regularist then. You're saying they're just descriptions of what happens. They're not
Descriptions that we try to make. Sure.
okay.
Reality is reality. Causality.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess we can transition back to. I also wanted to ask you about your article. You said you could take all the positive valence of a life, subtract the negative valence, and that gives you the value. So my question is, does the distribution of positive and negative experiences matter? Like if you have to choose between your life being really good the first half of your life and then really bad, or really bad the first half of your life and then really good, does that distribution, does the order matter, or is that just the same? Because you still have the same positive value, same negative value, you're going to get the same result.
Yeah, it's purely subjective. It's each instant you have a new entity, okay, and that instant at the moment experiences whatever it experiences, okay. So that could be good or bad or whatever it feels, and then if you combine them all together, you get a duration of time of value for that entity. So it's you're asking, okay, if something is good before and then bad later, does that matter, or the extent of it? And it's just going to be a summation.
So for you, the
Of the
order
total.
doesn't matter. Like if
Not
you had,
not first versus the end. No.
so like if you had to choose between, let's say, to make it more concrete, like if you had to choose, um, for the rest of your life, if you're told half of it's going to be really good, the other half's going to be really bad, you wouldn't care if the first half is really good or if the second half is
Well,
really
I'm
good.
saying objectively, I believe it doesn't matter to that whole entity as it is, but the first half entity could be feeling really good, and so that entity is positive, and the next half could be negative, and then you put them all together and it's the whole thing.
Okay.
So you have to be extremely subjective, and the subject being the total thing, then there it is.
Yeah, I think for me, the order would matter. Like,
okay,
like if I had to choose,
you'd
yeah, I
rather
mean,
have
we're
the
getting
good stuff at the end, maybe, or something.
right. I think I prefer the good stuff at the end. But another question I had was like, if you had, I'm curious about like if there's. It seems like this is kind of a classical utilitarian view where it's just happiness minus suffering, right? So my question is, if happiness and suffering are equivalent in that they're going to cancel each other out, they have the same value, only opposite signs. One's positive, the other's negative. Does that mean like if you had to choose, suppose someone offered you experience extreme bliss for 5 minutes and then extreme agony for 5 minutes, or you could say extreme agony then extreme bliss for 5 minutes, or your third option is none, so just forgo the whole thing entirely. Would you choose? I guess the first question is, can 5 minutes of bliss cancel out 5 minutes of agony, or is there some sort of asymmetry there?
Well, theoretically, yeah,
they can cancel each other. So would you take that offer, I guess, is the question.
Well, here's the deal. Yes, theoretically they cancel out, just like mathematically things cancel out. Okay.
Right.
But make sure they're the same. The same cancels out the same. One way or the other. And the problem being that for the human anyway, it seems to me it's weighted on the negative side because pain can be so much more horrible than anything positive that you could ever feel. So
it's hard to, I guess, like I would say I would never take that offer. I would always just choose neither. But maybe it's only because whenever we imagine bliss and agony, the agony is always worse than the bliss. We have to imagine more bliss or less agony in order to even them out.
Yeah, and let's not just keep it on what I want to do. Let's keep it on what evolution wants to do.
So I remember before I wanted to ask you about it. You kind of personified evolution before too. So I guess my question is like, what is your view of evolution? Like, do you, I guess, would you have like the classical Darwinian view? It's just there's just a bunch of there's no like actual, even though you personify it, there's no actual intelligence behind it. It's just a bunch of random. I don't even know if random is the right word. I guess.
Yeah. Probably not random either, but
it's deterministic, but there's no intelligence behind it. It's just
exactly. Yeah, the blind watchmaker.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, the point being that evolution figured out how to use some of the tools that were in nature. Not figured out, but it did. You know.
Didn't actually figure it out because there's no one to figure it out.
Yeah,
the point is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it did.
Just speaking.
Yeah.
I guess speaking like metaphorically or
anthropomorphically, we can speak that way.
Yes.
Anyway, we have hopes and worries given the future, and that motivates us along. So that's what we do about the future, and we are teleological, meaning purpose driven, given our hopes and our worries about the future, versus something that is not conscious. They have no purpose. They're just programmed like our idiot machines that clean our floors or whatever, the robots.
Maybe idiots for now. Who knows in a few years?
Well,
do you think? I guess that's another. Oh, that's too off topic, but I'll come back to that later.
I know. But no, it's the same thing. Evolution figured it out. Whether we will or not remains to be seen.
Figure out what?
How to create sentience.
Oh, dude, right. But yeah. Well, I guess my next question is evolution teleological?
No.
Okay, that makes sense. That's what I expected. I just wanted to make sure because I noticed like a lot of times when naturalists talk about evolution, they speak about it as if it's teleological. Like I probably do it myself.
Yeah, but that's just a human convention.
Mm-hmm. It's just I think it's interesting that we're so drawn to speaking about it teleologically. But yeah.
How else are you gonna do it?
It's just it's just funny how like we always talk about like how evolution's goal was human life, but we can't. Evolution had no goal. It was just a bunch of unintelligent processes, from our view,
that's human language. How else are we going to do it? You know.
Right.
So you got to accept the blind watchmaker.
Yeah. So I guess we could close with just discussing your principle of axiology because that's what you ended with.
Okay.
So so you compare. So you say it's possible for a machine which is not conscious, like a brain, to produce a punishment/reward dynamic, or a type of stuff which constitutes all that's valuable to anything. So just as electricity powers the computers that we build, neurons power the brains in our heads. This is the stuff which powers a conscious form of function by which existence is perceived. So you're comparing it to computers and neurons, and you're saying that brains also give us what is valuable, right? So it's
well, yeah, I see what you're saying, and yes, ultimately, I'm calling consciousness as a form of computer.
Okay, kind of a computationalist view of consciousness.
Yeah, but maybe even a little bit more than that. I consider the brain to exist as a neuron-fueled computer, just like the computers that we use are electricity-based computers.
Right.
Brains have their own the neuron which fuels with the sort of things that they do. But anyway, I believe that the brains, as an output of the brain, they create a different computer, okay? A sentience-based computer. And so I call this essentially consciousness, but it would be a computer in it that's based upon feeling good and not feeling bad. And so someday maybe we'll discuss my dual computers model of consciousness. Okay.
Yeah, so the question I wanted to ask you before is, can computers be conscious?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I figured. Just making sure. I think you're committed to that view. I think a physicalist is committed to that view, and even maybe some dualists are committed to that view. But so what do you what's your prediction? How long till computers are conscious, or will they ever be conscious?
Do we create it?
Yeah.
I consider us pretty pathetic.
So it'll be a while.
Yeah, let's not. I mean, the physics is there, and I don't even dispute that we can potentially do the physics in a couple hundred years to
still
say that hey, I built something and it's feeling pain right now. To me, that's conscious.
Right, okay? I agree. That to me, it's just the ability to feel anything. It's pleasure, pain. That's conscious.
Yeah. Qualia.
Yep.
And I could say in a couple hundred years we could probably do that. Could we actually engineer that such that it's functional? I don't know.
Okay, so it seems like you're less optimistic than someone like Ray Kurzweil, who's saying it's going to be. I think he would say it's pretty soon. You think he's too optimistic or pessimistic, depending on how you look at it?
Kurzweil is a freak to me. Okay.
He's definitely an interesting person. His goal is he wants us all to upload our minds to computers. So
yeah, well,
I don't know if that's the best.
uploading isn't really possible to me. Just
depends on your view.
You can copy, but you can't move my own consciousness to something else.
Well, it also depends on your theory of consciousness and your view of identity.
All that sort of
depends. Like I think Kurzweil would say, as long as the computer has your personality, it's basically you. Mm-hmm. I think he said even that there could be two of you. Like if you, like I think he gave an example in his book. I think it was How to Create a Mind. He said if you were to remove neurons from a person's brain one by one, and then build a new brain out of those neurons, and every time you take a neuron out, replace it with a silicon neuron, you now have the brain with the neurons that was rebuilt somewhere else, and you'd have the brain with the silicon here. And he's saying they would both be you. I think that's what he said. Mm. So his view of personal identity is saying as long as it has your personality and memories, it's basically you. So that's why he would say you could upload, but maybe you would say that's not really you just because it has your memories and personality.
Let's say this. I mean, yeah, that's all. That's all, I don't know, sci-fi stuff, you ask me. But let's say this. Something is magically created to be exactly me. Okay? Right next to me. Okay?
Yeah.
Still not me.
Right, that's the classic thought experiment. Like if you went into like this machine that destroyed you and then recreated you on Mars, you would say that's not you. You can't just teleport your consciousness.
Something magically right next to me that's exactly like me is not me. It's him. Because how do you know? You put us in different rooms. I feel what I feel. He feels what he feels. Right?
Right. There can't be two of you. Whereas Kurzweil might say there could be two of you.
You can call it two of me if you want.
But it's not really.
I feel what I feel, and he feels what he feels. So I cannot be something just because something's similar to me. The guy that's standing next to me, he is exactly me, except he's not me because I feel what I feel and he feels what he feels, right? So,
yeah, it sounds like you're saying if two beings are having different experiences and they're not the same person, and I would agree with that. You can't have beings having different experiences but call them the same person.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and if you put me something like me on some other planet many galaxies away, it's not me.
Right.
Because I feel what I feel. It feels what it feels.
It's tough. I mean, that's like the intuitive view. I did read part 3 of Reasons and Persons by Derek Parfit. He makes very interesting arguments there. So he did definitely challenge, make me reconsider a lot about my view, and I think I ultimately agree with his view in the end, Derek Parfit's view. But yeah, he's the one who gave that example of like destroying you on Earth and recreating you. He would say you're not even being destroyed on Earth. He would say you're being teleported to Mars. But yeah.
Well, I don't feel what that guy up there feels.
Right, assuming it's not you, but he would say it is you, that you were destroyed. Or he wouldn't even say destroyed. He would say you were teleported to Mars.
Let's say don't destroy me. No,
there's 2 of you.
Magical being. There's 2 of us.
Yeah.
Do I feel what he feels?
No, so it's not you.
Okay.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but then he gives a lot of other interesting examples, like
yeah, he keeps talking, huh?
Right. Are you familiar with Parfit?
I agree with his what do you call it? Whatever. Again,
his moral view, or like I know he's like kind of a utilitarian, so maybe you agree with him there.
I thought he was sort of against utilitarianism.
I'm not really sure. I'll have to look into that. I know he was influenced by Sidgwick. I think he was a utilitarian, but yeah, I don't know. I'll look into it.
He put his the repugnant conclusion.
Oh, that's what you were. Okay, that's yeah. I read part 4 as well.
I agree with his repugnant conclusion. Okay.
You think it's repugnant?
That's anti-utilitarianism, and I'm not really at utilitarianism. I'm amoral.
Wait, so when you say you agree with the repugnant conclusion, what do you mean? Do you mean that
I mean that what's good can be horrible.
Yeah, like I think so. I guess the question is, from your perspective, is if you have like the 2 populations, A is a few very happy people, Z is an extremely high number of somewhat happy people. Which would you say is better?
Like I said before, it all depends upon the magnitude.
So you just sum the happiness, right? So okay, so I think you would say Z could be. Parfit sets it up so that Z, the sum of the happiness in Z is greater than the sum of the happiness in A. So you would say Z is better than A then, I think. Okay.
It's just that certain things in reality are repugnant.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of tempted to just accept the repugnant conclusion and argue it's not actually that repugnant. Like, I think he does specify that every life in Z is still worth living. So as long as each life is still worth living, is it really that repugnant?
Hell of a lot better than what it could be.
Yeah, and like I think a lot of it though comes down to what makes a life worth living. What does it mean for life to be worth living? That's a very difficult question.
Feeling good.
Right. For you, it's just sum it all up. For me, the distribution matters as well. Like I don't know if you had a life where there was just barely more happiness than suffering, you would say that life is worth living. For me, I don't know, because that sounds like a lot of suffering. But
No, that's not suffering. By definition, it's barely good. Now,
but I'm saying the suffering, like I'm saying, say there's like 51 units of happiness, 50 units of suffering. You would say, so you do 51 minus 50, you get 1. So then you would say it's worth living, right?
Oh, well, okay. If you're going to go to the negative side, yeah. Yep.
Okay. Right. I'm saying that still sounds like so much suffering to me. If there's barely more happiness than suffering, then I'm not sure if I would say that life is worth living. But yeah, it's tough. I don't know. We've covered a lot. Just go branching off of that post. We covered a lot of ground. So yeah, I guess we can end it there unless you want to talk about anything else.
No, it's good. It's good to talk to you about this stuff. And
yeah, this is a good discussion. Yeah, thanks for coming on my channel.
Definitely. We'll see if we have some more sometime. And nice to meet you, Liam.
Thanks. So for viewers, the links to Eric's blog and a link to the blog post we discussed will be in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.